So today we are planning our own investigation into the hardness of rocks, just like most scale shows. So today will be the planning lesson, and next week we'll do our investigation. So for next week you will need to collect your own rocks. These can be any types of rocks whatsoever, so if you struggle to find some, don't worry, even if it is that you just find a small stone, a medium stone and a big stone. Just so they're slightly different, or even 3 different stones that are slightly different colours is fine. The important thing is that we are working scientifically, so don't worry if you can't find a variety like I have here. A couple of things to remember when you are finding your stones or rocks: please wear gloves, wash your hands and wash your stones as well when you get them home. So I'm going to show you the different types of rocks that I have here. So first of all, I have quite a big piece of slate. Now slate is a metamorphic rock, which means that it's been made from heat and pressure. It's often used for things like tiles on roofs, floors. The properties of this rock are that it's quite durable. It's impermeable as well, which means that it doesn't let liquid or gas through it. So it is quite a hard, strong rock. My next rock that I have is limestone. So this is a sedimentary rock, which means that it's been made up of lots of layers that have been compacted together under pressure, which they normally are formed in seas and in water. Now this is a hard, fine-grained rock. It's quite often used within cement, and also a lot of limestone contains fossils as well, which is quite cool. And it's also used within colours, in paints as well. My third rock, this is my favourite one, this is quartzite. So you can kind of see all the little kind of shiny bits in here. This is a metamorphic rock as well, and it's made up of quartz, which was a mineral that was on Mohs scale, I think number 7 for hardness. So that means it is a very hard rock, and we know that because it's used for things like tiles, flooring, steps and things like that. So, and the minerals, the way that they are combined under the heat and pressure, mean that they kind of intertwine and they make it really strong. Okay, my fourth rock is iron ore. Now this is it's a bit dirty, it's got some paint on it. This is also a sedimentary rock actually, and it's made by a chemical reaction of iron and oxygen. And it's used in the production of iron, which is then used to make steel, which is a metal, and this is used in things like buildings, making ships and cars and things like that, so that's also a very strong one. Now my final rock is chalk. Now it might look a bit strange, but it is a rock, but it has just been formed into a drawing tool. Now this is sedimentary as well, and it's very soft and it's fine-grained. You quite commonly see it in cliffs, like the White Cliffs of Dover in Kent, if you've ever been there, and it's used to draw with because it's soft. So for our investigation, we are going to do this by, basically we need to test the hardness of these different rocks. So we need to use some different tools to try and scratch our rocks to see if we can create scratches in them. So we're going to do this by using 3 different scratching tools. A soft one, which we're actually just going to use our nail with. Okay, we'll be doing the investigation next week, I'm just going to explain now. So we can scratch the rock with our nail to see if that makes an indent and it makes a scratch, and if it does, then we know that the rock is very soft. Our next tool that we can use is a copper coin. So you might have a 2p coin or maybe a 1p coin, and then we can scratch it with that, because this is a bit harder than our nail. So if this makes a mark, we'll know it's the rock is a bit harder. If that still doesn't work, and our nail hasn't worked and our copper coin hasn't worked, then we can use something a bit sharper and a bit harder. I've got a needle, so something like that, or maybe even a safety pin might work. And then we can use that as our hardest scratching tool. And if that makes a mark, but the other 2 haven't, then we know that it's a hard rock. So we will do the same process, and each of our rocks, we'll scratch them all with our fingernail, then a copper coin, and then a needle, and we'll be able to see the difference between each one. It might be that the chalk is scratched very easily with the fingernail, but then actually the iron ore isn't scratched by any of them, which would prove that that would be the hardest one. Okay, so I'm going to show you our investigation plan questions. Okay, so these are going to be our subheadings for our plan. So have a look. These are just the ones that we'd normally use when we draw up our plan. So I'm going to ask you what you think for each one. Once I've done that, you can pause the video, give your answer, press play again, and I'll explain. So our variables. So remember, what will I change and what will I observe? So the variable is the thing that we're going to change. So what do you think that is, and what will we observe? Okay, our variables are going to be our rocks, our different types of rocks. That's the one thing that we'll change every time. And we can observe the scratch mark in the rocks, okay? And we'll look at that every time and see if there is a difference between the different scratches. Fair test. What will I keep the same? So this is really, really important. What kind of things are we going to keep the same every time? Because say if I was scratching my slate and my iron ore, and I used my hardest scratching tool, if I scratch the slate loads and loads and loads like that, but then barely touch the iron ore, would that be fair? It wouldn't be. So have a little think about the different things we need to make sure we keep the same every time we're testing on each different rock. Okay, so the things we'll need to keep the same is probably the length of the scratch, how hard we scratch, because we can't just tap one and really go for it on another. So we'll need to make sure we apply the same force in each scratch. And we'll also need to make sure that we use the same tools on every single rock. So we need to use a needle for every rock, our fingernail for every rock, and our copper coin for every rock. Because if we changed it each time, it wouldn't be a fair test. Okay, our question is next. When I scratch the rock, how could we finish off our sentence? When I scratch the rock, what will happen to the surface? Okay, straightforward. Our method. Now this is just when we explain what we're going to do, and we can use our time connectives here. Have a little think and then I'll explain. So our method could be something like, first I will gather my rocks or stones and my scratching tools. Then I will scratch each rock with my fingernail and record whether it is scratched or not in a table. Then I will scratch each rock with a copper coin, and then finally I will scratch each rock with my needle and record all of the results. Okay, really straightforward. So just explaining what we're going to do. Equipment, nice and easy. We're going to need some stones or rocks, some scratching tools, so that would be a copper coin, fingernail and needle. Okay, measure. Okay, so how can we measure our results? How could we record the results? How could we display them? How could we do this? Have a little think. So we measure by observing the rocks as we scratch them and see how much they have been scratched by each tool, okay? And we could record our results in a table, couldn't we? Okay, so we could have the names of all the rocks and then the names of the scratching tools, and we could put a tick or a cross if it has been scratched or not, okay? I'll put a little example in the PowerPoint for you. And then finally, your prediction. Now, I don't expect you to do a prediction this week because you don't have your rocks just yet. So you won't really know until you gather your rocks for next week. So normally we would do a prediction in our plan, but I think what we'll do is put we can do a prediction at the beginning of next week. Now, I have made a prediction for the rocks that I have, and I'll just explain how what my prediction is. So I predict that the hardest rock is going to be the quartzite, okay, and this is because it is a metamorphic rock, which means that it's been formed from heat and pressure, and it is made up of lots of tiny minerals which have grown together tightly to make it really hard, and it is used for things like steps, walls and other strong structures. So can you see how I've predicted my hardest rock and explained why? And I've used scientific vocabulary there and explaining the type of rock and what it's used for and why I think it's going to be hard. Okay, then I predict the softest rock, and I think you'll probably agree with me, is going to be the chalk. And this is because it's a sedimentary rock made up with layers which break away very easily, and it's used for drawing because it is so soft. Okay, so just to give you an idea, but don't worry too much yet about doing your prediction until next week. Okay, so the must, should and could are all on the PowerPoint for you. I hope everything makes sense, and good luck.